Yeah, thank you. We're talking to Thomas Morgan, who's a deputy Kern County counsel, who back in 1997 was a Kern County sheriff's deputy on patrol in Cottonwood and was shot and critically injured, almost killed, almost paralyzed, point blank in the neck by a 17-year-old gangbanger. Fast forward 19 years, and he comes face to face with him at a parole hearing. Tom, would you mind? And I'm going to ask you to speak closer to the mic because your raspy voice is a result of this injury, correct?
Yes.
Right. So, can you take us through the incident quickly and tell us exactly what happened? Because it's so egregious to me because not only were you shot, but then he tried to shoot you at least 2 other times with another weapon. So, tell us what happened that night.
Well, I was in the car for the first night with a new trainee in the car, and we got a call of shots fired in the area of Brook and Madison. We responded to the area, found a car with 2 occupants. I had my trainee approach the car. He brought out Samuel. He was searching Samuel. He yelled, "I've got a gun." Samuel took off. I took off after him. My trainee tried to cut him off going around the other side of the building. When I got around the back of the house that he ran behind, I saw him attempting to break into the back door of the home. At that point, I wasn't absolutely sure that my partner didn't get his gun. I didn't see a gun in either of his hands. He was trying to break into a home, but I was unsure of my backstop. So I didn't feel confident in using deadly force at that point because I couldn't safely do it, and he wasn't clearly in possession of a weapon. My only choice at that point was to either allow him to continue to try to break into the home, and I didn't know if the occupants, if there was even occupants in the home. So I closed on him. We began to struggle. I used my pepper spray on him. I tried to use my baton. During the struggle, I lost my primary sidearm. While we were struggling, I felt his hands go down to his waist. A few seconds later, I felt this blinding pressure. I felt this immense pressure and a blinding flash, and I was instantly paralyzed. And the doctors explained later that because some of the shotgun pellets hit up against my spine, it actually created a temporary paralysis. I fell to the ground. He stood over me. A few seconds later, I was able to move again. I drew out my backup weapon, which I kept in my front vest pocket, and started to point it at him. As I did so, he grabbed it out of my hand, turned it around, pointed it at me, and pulled the trigger. He racked the slide, pointed it at me again, and pulled the trigger. He did that one more time. He didn't understand how to use the weapon that I was carrying as a backup, so he was unable to employ the safety that was on the gun.
Okay, so it was not a malfunction. He just didn't know how to move the safety.
Correct.
Okay.
But one of the pieces of evidence, of course, of his intent to try to kill me with my backup was the 2 unexpended rounds that he racked out of the semi-automatic that were laying on the ground where we struggled. There's no other way they would have gotten out of the gun and onto the ground like that. While he was trying to get my gun to work, I was out of weapons, so I reached around and found a board that was laying nearby. I hit him in the head with it. He kind of staggered back and then came back at me, punched me in the face. I went down again, and when I sat back up, I realized he was gone. I got up and then tried to find a different place.
How could you get up after being shot like that? Was it just all adrenaline?
I'd gone ever since the stabbing that I was involved in '87. I had spent a great deal of time going through scenarios of what I'd do if I got into another situation like that. And I just went on autopilot. I just did what I had gone through in my own mind, right. 1,000 times. Eventually, they found me, got me to KMC. KMC managed to intubate me, and they took, I think, 130 pellets out of my neck, plus the wadding from the shotgun round.
And how long were you hospitalized?
About a month.
About a month. Tell me, for those of you who just joined the program, we're talking to Tom Morgan, a former deputy who's now a lawyer and a county counsel, who attended the parole hearing of this now 34-year-old man who was 17 when he shot Tom. How how do you find forgiveness? How do you dispense with the anger? Are you a religious man? Is it I mean, how do you find it in your heart with this guy who not only shot you but tried to kill you two other times were it not for the safety on that he didn't know how to operate?
Well, and that really is one of the central questions that I ask myself, and it, I can't afford to be angry at him. One of the things that I found when laying in the hospital at UCLA was that the people that love you suffer a great deal more than you do when something like this happens. I knew what I was getting into when I pinned on my badge that night. I knew fully well that I could be attacked and even killed every night I got into that patrol car. So I knew the risks, I accepted them, and that happened wasn't a surprise to me. But when you're sitting in that hospital bed, it's and looking at all of the people standing over you, you can see on their faces that that's not a deal that they made, and that's not an understanding that they ever came to. And any second of pain or anger or regret that I show ends up, what I found is it extends the pain that the people around me end up feeling. And I don't, for one thing, I don't have a right to do that. And the other thing is that I don't see him as having anything to do with my well-being. I can choose to live in the past and worry about what happened to me, or I can live my life. And like I explained to the parole commission, I can't sit here in front of you and say that everything that happened to me after that time was bad. In fact, I can find very few things bad outside of what it did to my friends and family that actually happened to me. I mean, it's made me a lot stronger person. It may have, messed up my singing career, but that was really, dead and gone long before that happened. I mean, I know things about myself, about my own strength, about my capacity to endure things that I would never have known before. And I know that if things like that happen to me in my life, and that includes virtually anything, that I have the strength to withstand them. And that's actually something that he gave to me that you can't get anywhere else. And that in some strange way, I actually am grateful for. And so I can't say that I can't hold a great deal of animosity towards him, because I've actually turned out, at least in my own way, I feel that I'm a better person because of what happened to me.
When you went in that parole hearing and he came in the room, or maybe he was there when you walked in, did you make eye contact, and what did you see in his eyes?
He looked beaten. He looked completely subdued. And when I say beaten, I mean, I'm not saying he looked like he'd been beaten up or physically abused. He looked like he had been totally institutionalized, like he had resigned himself to his fate. Now, I believe that he, did a fairly diligent job of defending himself and preparing for the hearing. He'd taken quite a few classes and had made quite a few contacts with nonprofits outside of the prison. He had a plan on what he was going to do if he did get out of prison. One of the things that was really, it made the hairs on my neck stand up, was they have him in the hearing go through the crime in his own words. And for the first time, I heard somebody besides myself, and only he and I could testify to it, tell what happened that night. And his version of events at the parole hearing was almost identical to what I explained to investigators and what I just ended up telling you a few minutes ago. And to hear him say that he tried to kill me with first with his handgun and then with my backup weapon, just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up.
Did he apologize to you? Has he apologized to you? Did he address you directly in the parole hearing?
He's not allowed to even look at inmates aren't even allowed to look at the victims in the parole hearings. And one time he apparently did glance at me, and I wasn't looking at him. And the commissioner immediately admonished him, "You do not look at the victim."
And why is that? If he were, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, and he wanted to look you in the eyes and go, "I'm so terribly sorry," why would that be prohibited?
I think one of the revelations about the hearing for me was that the victim is at the hearing only for the victim. The victim's not there to provide evidence. The victim's not there to argue to the parole commission that you should let this person stay in prison. They are there for their own reasons, and I suspect that those reasons vary. There are probably as many as those people that show up for hearings. I suspect a lot of people don't show up for hearings. So I think the board takes special care to make sure that the victims are treated with respect, that they're not intimidated, that they're not confronted. I could have gone and just sat there and said nothing. They'd have been fine with that. But when I did speak to the parole board, they gave me their complete and undivided attention. And I really sensed that they were making a real effort to make sure that whatever I had to say, they were going to listen to. And I think if I'd have talked all day, they'd have sat there and listened to me all day.
Did you have any trepidation about even going to the parole hearing? Because it would have gone on without you, correct?
Yes. And originally, I when I first got the notice a few months before the hearing, I didn't even think, I thought I wouldn't even go. But the more I thought about that, the more I thought, if for no other reason, I have to go to show that whatever he feels, whatever he does, other inmates, other criminals have to know that if you hurt law enforcement in the line of duty, that they're going to show up and they're going to stand up for society and sit in that board, whether the board takes any notice of it or not. And they're not going to be afraid, and you're going to look them in the eye and tell them, we're not going to put up with this. And that was my original thought when I went into the hearing. Quite honestly, I don't think he has the connections or the credibility as an inmate that would make much difference. But that was my thoughts when I went into the hearing.
Mr. Beene, we got to take a break right quick.
Tom's going to stick around for one last segment, right, Tom?
You betcha. We'll be right back. More Deputy County. I almost said assistant. I was a close one. And Richard Beene. We'll be right back. It's First Look. It's News Talk 1180 and the new 96.1 KERN. We're streaming live on the internet at Bakersfield.com.